It's Wizards versus Lesbians, a podcast for your ears. Hello and welcome to Wizards versus Lesbians. My name is Isaac.
I'm Alexis.
And we have a guest today. Hello, guest.
Hello. Nice to be here.
Thank you. Our Jake is guest Casella Brookins, SF reviewer and podcaster. And you have brought us a book today.
I have, yes. Today we are reading Angelmaker by Nick Harkaway.
We are indeed. This stemmed from our conversation about Carla's choice with Arkany Martine, if I'm not mistaken, in which we said that we would be interested in checking out Nick Harkaway's SF. Jake, can you give us a plot summary of Angelmaker?
Yeah, absolutely. And I should say, too, that when you had reached out to me about potentially appearing on the show, and I went through my mental Rolodex of Wizards versus Lesbians, and Angelmaker was the first one that sprang to mind. So we'll see if you two agree with that. But yeah, so this is one of Nick Harkaway's novels. I believe it's his second or third novel. It's originally from 2012. And it's kind of a fantastic, slightly steampunk or diesel punk kind of spy thriller with elements of fantasy and sort of like noir gangster shoot 'em up. It follows this clock repair person, Joe Spork, in London, who gets pulled into this big, giant international plot due to things that his parents and grandparents were involved in that wind up with a bunch of mechanical bees, possibly bringing about the end of the world. And then Joe and a bunch of friends have to go fight it. And it jumps back and forth in time between, roughly, late 90s, early aughts kind of setting, and then back in time to World War II and in between with another character.
I would say that sums it up.
Yep.
We basically get an entire series of Bond films that is alluded to between these two time periods.
Yeah.
About our other character fighting her nemesis. And we will get to that. Are there wizards in this book?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely. This is technology which is completely indistinguishable from magic in every respect. Are there lesbians?
There's certainly bisexual women whose main relationships are with other women.
Yes.
One of whom is a viewpoint character.
Mm-hmm.
Edie is basically, I would call Edie a lesbian.
Yes, Edie is certainly close enough. And also fulfills the lesbian role in the narrative, if we've established that there is a lesbian role to be played in the narrative. Mm-hmm. As close as one can without actually being the protagonist. And the wizards and lesbians in conflict?
Oh, yeah.
Very definitely.
Although it's interesting because the two main wizards, are Frankie and Chem Tsien, depending on sort of how you define the wizardry here. So we have...
That's true. So one of the wizards is also a lesbian.
Yes.
Or, bisexual
also
woman
a bisexual woman, yeah.
Slash the lesbian's love interest.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So we have wizards, lesbians, and wizard lesbians.
There's sort of a triangle of, combat and love relationships between variously wizardly and non-wizardly lesbians and other people in this book.
No, we're definitely in the right zone, at least on paper. So, why should you read this book? And I'm going to go Jake and then Alexis and then myself.
Yeah, sure thing. By the way, just for conversation, I go by Casella as my name.
Sorry about that.
It's not like a hard preference, just so we feel like we're friends.
Okay, can do.
That's what my friends call me. Why should you read this book? You should read this book. I think you should read this book if you like Bond movies. And actually, I think you should read this book if you like weird things that are similar to that, actually. It's really sort of madcap. It's sort of like drenched in detail and reasonably low-key puns and jokes all throughout. It's just really sort of packed and overflowing. This is not like a tight, stripped-down, spare narrative. It's constantly sort of diving into asides all the way throughout. You should eat it if you like the ingredients, not necessarily.
I like that.
Yes.
Alexis.
Well, so the vibe I kind of got from this is I feel like if you're really nostalgic for that sort of late 90s, early aughts era Neil Gaiman, Neverwhere type stuff, I think, but you want to read a less problematic author and something that's a little bit more up to date, then I think that this will I think that this has all those same ingredients. And so I sort of agree that there's a lot of, I guess, if the things in this appeal to you, then you may enjoy it. It's, yeah, but I don't know. If you liked Neverwhere and you want something with a lot more words, and it's...
Strangely enough, Neverwhere as directed by Guy Ritchie is what I thought also. There's a heaping helping of both Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett in here. And you do feel that sort of, at least I did, I felt that sort of nostalgic tug towards those books because I loved Good Omens when I was in high school. I loved Discworld. And we're adding like a whole heap of other like very English tropes and plot things like the hard men of London and sort of cute cartoon gangsters and all of this. And again, like these are all ingredients. And if you like clever prose, because there's plenty of clever prose, there's so much clever prose. You can eat it up with a spoon. It can last you for days. And I think that it provides a fascinating viewpoint into a very particular kind of politics, which I would describe as sort of like, there's a bit of a Rosetta Stone into sort of how we got that way in terms of the current state of English politics, where there is a sort of a centrist party contradicting itself into nothingness at the moment. All of the like mental tension and like trying to figure out what it means to be post-imperial stuff, that's all in here, and it's all sort of grappled with but never really delved into. So it's sort of like watching somebody else dream their way around these concepts, and that was interesting to me as I read this.
I have a lot of thoughts about that, but I'll hold that till after the spoiler zone.
Perfect, thank you. So why shouldn't you read this book? Same order.
Why shouldn't you read this book? Well, you shouldn't read this book if you have ever found Terry Pratchett or Douglas Adams annoying. Also, I would say probably don't read this if you don't like sort of going down a YouTube or Wikipedia rabbit hole style of writing, kind of similar to like Neil Stephenson, where this book is constantly just like sort of sees a shiny thing and is like, I want to tell you about this shiny thing. And I really enjoy that, but if you don't dig that, don't read it. Also, I would say don't read this if you have a low tolerance for very tropey, heavily riffing on well-established genre conventions from like a handful of conventions. But this is often sort of like signposting what it's doing in reference to some sort of pulp, detective, spy, noir kind of thing. Including how it portrays women and sexuality, and as we alluded to, some of the international politics feel a little tropey in a kind of weird way. Also, don't read this if you have incredibly strong feelings about misinterpreting the Heisenberg uncertainty principle.
Yeah. Also, don't read this if you don't like cutesy organized crime. If you have feelings about that, don't read this if you're impatient. So I actually do I loved Moby Dick, for example. I love long meandering asides, but this book it will use so many, it's not even that it goes on tangents, it's just that the author uses so many words sometimes to say very little. And it's clear that a lot of this is just he's having fun. And occasionally I would be like, okay, I'm picking up on the fun that you're having, and that's sort of vicariously enjoyable. But a lot of the time, it's just like, okay, yes, I know you're very clever. So that, I think, and then, it feels a lot older than it is in terms of race and gender and I guess imperialism as well. So I don't know. I kept, every single time I was about to just give up, I would find something else that was kind of entertaining. But I definitely found it a bit of a slog. Maybe don't try to read it all in one go.
Yeah.
It's a fairly chunky book.
Yeah, no, I think that, like, as we said in the beginning, if you like this in little helpings, then maybe that is the best way to experience the book. Because again, if you try to shotgun it, the plotting is not its best feature. The length is excessive. I'm an Anglophile, and
I'm
I
not.
I found the Englishness oppressive to the point of being eventually infuriating. Which, that's all about, like, how sensitive you are to this sort of stuff. I'm absolutely willing to take all of the, like, boys' own, adventure novels from the late 19th century up to the 20s stuff that this book is doing as pastiche and accepting it on that level. But I still think that putting and we know this is bad now tag before your big section where you just do the same thing does not absolve you of just recapitulating the same tropes. You can hang a hat on it, but it's still there. And so if you dislike that, there is, like, uncountable amounts of that in this text.
Yeah, and I think you're right that I think that that's my biggest objection to it, is that it's pastiche, and I just don't like pastiche very much.
Yeah. Now, unfortunately, we're name checking Neil Gaiman and Neil Stephenson here, who are two Neils that we both, like, dislike intensely as authors, and so that's sort of the zone that we're in here. So it's coming from a disadvantaged place with us specifically to begin with, and so do please keep this in mind as we continue discussing it.
It does also. This is one of those things where the author actually really suffers from comparison to his father. Like, if I were not such a fan of Le Carré's books, then I would just be like, oh, you're using a lot of words. And instead, particularly because the first one I read was Carla's Choice, so that, really calls the comparison to mind. I get the first chapter in and I'm like, okay, but your dad could have done this in a paragraph.
That was your first Harkaway?
Yeah, that was my first Harkaway.
Oh, interesting.
And again, huge Le Carré fan. So,
see, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, we can talk about this more in the spoiler zone, but, like, I feel like the shadow of his dad really continues to hang over this, including just, the character's dad issues are really interesting.
That's interesting. I would, for my part, I would strongly disagree. Mostly just because they, Le Carré and Harkaway's style is so distinct that I don't feel like they're close enough for me to get any sort of friction there. They feel like such wildly different. Harkaway is clearly, pulling from this deep pastiche, tropey, genre well. In a way that, like, brings, espionage novels to mind. But this book, if it were a Le Carré novel, would be so wildly different and, like, 200 pages shorter. And it wouldn't be, I feel like it would be totally different. So I never had that comparison in my mind.
No. Like, absolutely, this is not a book at all that Le Carré would write. But in terms of style, specifically, like, it would not have come to mind, except that it's one of the many things that it's drawing on for pastiche is spy novels. But again, like, a completely different kind of spy novel. It's only because this is, this is Le Carré's son. He references, his childhood in the acknowledgments. And again, the first one that I read was Carla's Choice. So the first one I read is his not particularly good attempt at mimicking his father's style. That this is a thing where, the author is dead, and yet in this case, because of I can't help but bring this context to bear in a way that I think is not entirely fair to Nick Harkaway.
Yeah, I'm totally willing to leave all of that on, like, aside, essentially.
Okay, I do want to talk about the dad issues stuff, though. Post-spoiler
It is funny how dad focused the whole thing is, given what we know, but it's not. The text isn't inviting us to discuss it the way that Carla's Choice was, so
I do want to talk about it briefly in the spoiler zone, though. Just
okay.
Okay, so we should do content warnings, though.
Yes.
Animal death.
Torture.
Quite a bit of torture.
A lot of torture in an interesting way that we will presumably get back around to talking about. Some like implied sex slavery, as we said, some old-fashioned racist tropes that are just sort of trotted around and used for the purposes of the thing. Crimes against physics, as you mentioned.
I would say potentially in its attempt to sort of, with a lot of cavalier attitude and gusto, give us a sort of sexually liberated and active protagonist in Eddie, maybe doesn't always hit the perfect note with that and the perfect balance. It's pretty offhand about it.
The book has what I would describe as a sort of a naughty postcard approach to sex, which is part of the overwhelming Englishness again. It's very naughty, and it is best not to take any of that particularly seriously if you want to enjoy yourself, I think.
Horrible things happen to elephants. I know I already said animal death, but just to drive that one home.
Oh, graphic murder of children.
How could we forget? How could we forget? Down the list after the physics. We often come up with things after the fact, so let's move on to the spoiler zone.
Oh, it's the spoiler zone. It's the spoiler zone. Got this book in. We should take a look in. Here's the spoiler zone.
Yeah.
So, Casella, you mentioned that you had stuff to say about the Imperial themes in this book. I wonder if you want to start us off there.
Yeah, well, I guess just kind of fascinated with how much, to me, that even though that is of a piece with the again, that sort of like tropey generic thing it's doing, how much to me that feels like a little bit of a weak point now. So for people who aren't familiar or haven't read it in a while, there's this made up country that's sort of Nepal-like, sort of Bhutan-like, and the primary antagonist is a member of the aristocracy there who had British schooling, went back home, becomes this sort of megalomaniac who seeks to become God with the help of really weird advanced physics. And it just having, I guess I'm always a little bummed out when this late in the game, in this millennium, when we're just using scary guy from the East as like basically the prime mover for the whole plot.
It really is just you could just assign this alongside to undergrads.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, it does have, like, I think Harkaway is aware of that, and he's sort of aware that that's in the DNA of this thing he's trying to reanimate. It has a couple quick throwaway lines about how much the antagonist is absolutely a product of imperialism, right? Like, he wouldn't arise on his own. He wouldn't be the way he is or even possible without the British Raj and all its many consequences. So it's not totally blind to it, but I think using that, like this, this racialized antagonist who's out to destroy the world, coupled with the like bizarrely depoliticized nature of that threat, where it's like, I just need a crazy guy who can blow up the world, and we're not going to think about the fact that actually international conflict is more complicated than that.
Right. There's nothing about natural resources. There's nothing about strategic locate. Like, if he is right there, then that's actually was a fairly useful strategic location in World War II, in like the CPI theater, and but that doesn't matter. What matters is that he's a scary yellow guy with a doomsday machine.
It's very similar to the Dr. Evil Bond style. We need a crazy villain, because if we have to look at where actual danger and evil in the world is coming from, it's this big complicated thing that implicates a lot of cultures. But you can just set him up as this sort of almost comic book-esque supervillain, which again, it's kind of fun how it works here on the page. But when you step back from it and think about it, I don't know, it just rings a little hollow for me.
Yeah, well, and I think also it's that he's kind of trying to have it both ways. Like, he wants Shem to be this, the British sins coming home to, but also he's such a caricature that he's still just kind of continuing all of those sins. Like, it's still that same reflexive, racism and dismissal. Like, there's no depth there. And so you can't have a story about your misdeeds coming back to haunt you if you're still not actually acknowledging what those misdeeds were. And that for me, I'm willing to have made up, South Asian, East Asian country as, whatever, but that the just complete lack of interest in giving this country any kind of interiority was really frustrating to me.
Yes, there are elephants. That is the extent of what we understand about this country, and that it wouldn't exist without the English. And this is part of, I think, what the having one's cake and eating it thing that is going on with this book generally is about. Is like we acknowledge, in order to take the curse of just pure regurgitated adventure story, spy story stuff, that this evil man is in some way the product of an imperial system, but it's not the imperial system. It's we made this person, the English, because he went to our school. We made him and then sent him out here. Perhaps we shouldn't have allowed foreigners into our schools. Is a potential thing that you can take away from that. And it's in much the same way as in the overall plot of this book, we, the English, created the doomsday device. By using a French person, admittedly, and we can give a little sort of nod to the rest of Western Europe, but we created the doomsday device. The Manhattan Project didn't happen in this timeline. That's not important. We are creating a world in which everything is and must always be centered around the English, their responsibility, their guilt, and what they value as a culture. But the other half of it is that the person who says, "Oh, we created him," is Edie. And I can give the author enough credit to be like, Edie, even though she as a point of view character has a very similar voice to every other point of view character, and also the overall narrative voice itself. Every character in this book, the characterization is done by turning up or down the cleverness dial. Until if you turn it all the way to the right, you get Mercer, the lawyer, who can't make a sentence without making a pun or a reference. You turn it down a little bit, you get to Joe Spork. Maybe in the middle, Edie lives. Incidentally, all the names. Edie Bannister is a riff on Minnie Bannister from the Goon Show. The French character is named Frankie Francoeur, the French lady. These are all like funny first draft names. And basically, maybe a litmus test to whether you should read the book or not is whether you think that's funny because it's so stupid. Because if you think that's funny because it's so stupid, you'll probably like the rest of the book as it goes on, because that's sort of the part of the way that the sense of humor in the book is engaged,
Almost 500 pages in which not a single hard-bitten gangster or, Black Ops government agent questions the last name Spork.
Well, the government Black Ops agent is named Titwhistle, so he really doesn't have a leg to stand on.
Titwhistle and Cummerbund.
Yeah.
Yep.
And again, they lampshade that right up front. Mm-hmm. They go, well, it's Titwhistle, Cummerbund, and Spork. Mm-hmm. All right, none of us are going to laugh at this.
We've made this decision. Now we're going to have to live with it for the next 500 pages. But the other half of the way that narrative is conceived is because this is a book from 2012. We are still firmly in the post 9/11 action movie, way to write stories zeitgeist in the world. Shem says, "I am inevitable" at some point, like Thanos from Avengers Endgame. He is his whole deal is so Marvel movie villain or like action movie villain, like I have determined via some cold communist coded reasoning that there is no that like it is acceptable to kill people for X and X reason, and while the reasons that I am in a disadvantaged position are extant, that is so far away from my actual reasoning as far as why I'm a terrorist that it is perfectly acceptable to just throw away all of my motivations and all of the background and be like, hey, this is me, the psycho villain, and we can feel very good about killing me because I'm pure evil. And that's just the way that's the way the popular stories are, and I feel like this book could have been made into a movie if it had been slightly less weird. And I could give it credit for being weird enough that it's not completely transformable into that kind of slop, but it still has those same bones, particularly in the last like quarter of the book, which is just MacGuffin, find the Doomsday device, just get rid of the Doomsday device, villain has to die in a horrible way, etc., etc.
I think we're on 3 levels of nested digressions from me here. Stay tuned for the point I was trying to make in about 12 minutes.
I really have a soft spot for speculative works, which is interesting. It's kind of a sidebar that like Harkaway is in a lot of ways separate from the discussions of science fiction and fantasy. Not published by SF for the most part. I think his last novella was from Tor, but in general has not
I think
been.
it's got an award as a crime novel, which is a really interesting way to parse it.
Yeah.
His stuff is like shown up on things like the Clark Award, but they tend to look a little more broadly than more American-centric genre awards. But anyways, a thing that I really like about a speculative novel is when they're kind of willing to try to do too much. I think like it's a lot easier to write formulaic things, obviously, right? And this is just sort of like upending the toolbox onto the table and just saying like, we're going to use all this. And to the extent that like, my main criticisms of the book are just that a few of those are just undercooked relative to how important they are. I think particularly with the apocalyptic threat of the bees and how that plays out. But I do just love, this is a novel about, a son rediscovering that he needs to reconnect with his gangster roots. Cool. It's also, that's interwoven with a super spy story from the 50s and 60s. Cool. But then it's also about killing God to replace him. And these intense clockwork creations, these very odd asides about how craftsmanship and artwork, it's just doing like a little too much. And I always enjoy a novel that's doing a little too much rather than just enough.
No, I mean, you're definitely right that a good ambitious mess is more fun than something that's, technically correct. But I felt like part of the problem was that it wasn't an ambitious enough mess. Like, that a lot of times I felt like he was going for the low-hanging fruit. I wanted it to be weirder.
Yeah, there is that. And it also felt to me like that there were, because he was doing so much, the parts of what was being brought up that were interesting to me personally were not explored, because there wasn't time to go deeply into any one of these 10 to 15 things that the book is trying to do at once. Like, what I was saying before I distracted myself with names is that it's Edie who says, "Oh, Chen Chen is the British Empire's fault," and later on, Edie says, "We burn the forests and borrow so much money that suddenly we're poor," which is like she has an extremely like sort of received surface level understanding of politics, and Joe actually comes to a deeper understanding of politics through the device of, oh wait, this lifestyle that I thought was just normal was actually funded by my father's rapacious stealing. That is a symbol of empire right there, And the conclusion that Joe comes to from this, and also from experiencing the brutality of the government, because it's always the hero who has to be tortured, is like, okay, I must become the hard man like my forefathers. I must grow up and realize that theft is in fact the way to keep my life going and to protect the people around me and to be brutal. And I'm like, okay, that's actually really interesting.
It is, but then I felt like he didn't commit to it, because then, like, as soon as he decides that he's going to really lean into a life of crime, suddenly all the criminals become kind of cuddly.
They were always cuddly from the very beginning.
Yeah.
I know, but like they get significantly cuddlier.
Like at the beginning of this, when Joe is wandering around the night market and being like, oh, all of these gangsters and criminals are so super cool and they never do anything really bad. They just steal from banks and the government. I was like, okay, this is a child's perspective on crime, on the underworld. Like, Joe will grow up and he will have a different perspective on this. And this is where I have to like shove Nick Harkaway's Le Carré's son away from me as part of this interpretive framework. Because reading Carla's Choice, I was always like, this is a child's idea of what this is. This is a child's idea of what this is. But then at the end, it's like, oh no, we're doubling down on that. His child's idea of what the world is, what London is, what the empire is, what Englishness is, that was all correct. And really what we need to do is barrel forward with it like a giant steampunk train, hurtling toward the plot's resolution. Because all this stuff, all this steampunk stuff is cool, actually. It is good, actually. It is what was good about us. And so that's what we need to get back to.
It's one of the things that I really enjoy about Harkaway's work is that all of his books have an interest in what within the book is like lowercase r reality. This book kind of goes a little off the rails a little bit with the uncertainty principle, the observer stuff, but trying to figure out. I find the way that he writes fairly up close moments with characters pretty great. When it's just sort of like Joe musing on his life, when it's just Edie sort of like, creaking around town doing her very old spycraft that still works, reflecting on her youth. I find those sections pretty great and pretty convincing. And then he does this thing where he sort of steps back and he's like, well, are we in the real world with a couple of these elements tacked on, or are we in a world where these cuddly gangsters have always been this sort of like cuddly noble gangster, right? Which is not the real world. Our external real world. And so when he does that thing of sort of like resurrecting it and going back to that, I don't know, it's this really interesting way that he's playing around with our dreams and our idealized conception of the world and what we can make real or not. I mean, this is like explicitly the plot of the Gone Away World. And I think in Tiger Man, even more, we have this like, what out of this extremely tired sort of imperial setting can we conjure up that is sort of more noble than that? So I don't know. I found that really interesting. The way that it's willing to sort of turn straight to the reader and just say, now we're going to do a bunch of these genre conventions. They are real for this book. Just go with it. I actually really dig that. I don't know. I like it.
I think that you're right in that's the theme of many of Harkaway's works in general, but I think it's also explicitly the theme of this one via the MacGuffin, via the bees, because how the world is destroyed if we shove away the I want to become God, everything is knowable bit, is if we make the world 10% more knowable, basically if we strip away this amount of our comforting delusions, things will become better. And
if we strip away any more,
that they will become bad. But the idea, as with all of these things, is that this is a reaction to what we are seeing now with like the bees are social media. We are talking about like people getting, the bees are Me Tooing people. The bees are stirring up like old crimes and lies and things that we don't think about from the past. And this is causing a lot of conflict and problems and changing the world. And we're in some way afraid of that. And in some ways desire that. And part of that is that there is this feeling that when you do that, and when you engage in criticism the way that we have been engaging in criticism, which is to point and say, that's problematic, that's not true, that's not how these things would be. You don't get to do that with this person in this culture because it's wrong. You're cutting off the author from a whole bunch of his favorite stuff and from a whole bunch of his cultural heritage in the Bond movies and in the adventure stories and all of this. And so I personally think, well, good, fuck you. But that's not like, but you can, it's definitely a more interesting question than that,
I guess I would actually have a little bit of different reading on it. So the idea that we're given, so, we have in the background of this novel, this sort of like whole secret English order of Ruskinites, right, who are like the brilliant crafters of mechanical analog devices. And we have Frankie, who's this, genius, high-level genius, and together they've created these bees that will spread truth around the world. The idea that like making it X percentage more true or knowable will bring about utopia, I don't think the book believes that. No. That's Frankie's argument, and I read it as something a little weirder that I mean, I don't want to read everything as like either totalitarian or anti-totalitarian, but I definitely do read this one as, Frankie was just wrong about this. And this is not moving towards quote unquote knowability is actually not moving towards truth. And the idea that things can be perfectly known, that is a danger in and of itself. That's not to be like post-truth or like reject truth or something like that. But the idea that we can know fully where everything fits into all its categories and all its boxes, that's a very dangerous, spooky idea. And that's what the bees are getting out there. And I was thinking about Vonnegut a lot through this, and the idea of of FOMA, and that like a lot of the things you believe and live by are in fact lies. Your beliefs are things that aren't verifiably true, but you're committing to them anyway. A lot of this novel is about Joe sort of finding out that he's been living by the wrong set and needing to switch them up. Not that he like discovers what's really, really true about himself, but he's just switching to something that works better. In a way that I think, not to keep calling back to other books, but I think Tiger Man is very concerned with that issue as well.
Yeah, no, I don't think we're disagreeing at all. Because I also don't think that we're meant to think that Frankie is right. I think that this is a reaction to what the author is seeing around him as far as the way that truth is being, used and in some cases weaponized on social media, and thinking about the consequences of that personally and culturally. And I think Edie and Frankie are meant to be the, if we want to do a totalitarian reading of this, Edie and Frankie are meant to be the well-meaning revolutionary leftists who don't understand that they're playing right into the hands of the communists who want to freeze everything into infinitely knowable categories, or fascists who want to be able to catalog everybody for extermination, or whichever totalitarian theme that you want to slot them into.
But I do think that this is a book about somebody saying, should I strip away my comforting delusions? No, I should double down on them.
Oh, thank God. And thank you, Alexis. I was never going to get there myself.
He has one comforting delusion stripped away, which is that, you can make a living, that it's his grandfather's, that you can make a living as a clockmaker in this economy. But like, the thing that he doubles down on is this fantasy world where all the crooks will, get together and for one last big heist, and you get to fly off into the sunset with, your stolen socks, and that sort of, you get your supervillain girlfriend, and just that, like, it's moving from one kind of unreality to another. And yes, it's moving from like a sort of bland, depressing unreality into a much more colorful, vibrant one, but it's also an even less real one.
Mm-hmm.
And so so the funny thing is that I really was sort of expecting this book where you've got your extended torture sequence and then everything goes off the rails and gets like extra gonzo. You expect that to end with like finding out that he's still locked in prison, right? That this is all some like delusion of his dying mind. And it doesn't. And so I don't know. I thought that was interesting, but also it's not that I think that's a bad choice, because obviously it's all just sort of a dream of your tortured mind is a really dumb, overused trope. But it felt like I thought that it had to be going somewhere with it, and then it just wasn't.
Oh, yeah, I want to call out one of my favorite moments in this entire book, and one that is stuck with me from it, is when Joe has escaped from being horribly tortured and is reunited with everybody. And they're sort of talking about what's happened and what's next. And he makes a comment about, how he kind of like adjusted to things after. I think he says like after the first month or two. And Mercer says like
and they're like, it's not even been a week.
and Spork says to him in complete seriousness, and it's complete seriousness in the book, it only seems like that to you because you were on the outside. And it's this moment of, again, it's like, it's a joke. It's kind of a clever pun. It's this very, very tropey thing, right? Of the action hero gets tortured, then comes out stronger than ever. But it's also like this really strange moment of reality and sort of like claiming it and flagging it that way of what his experience was like. And that the other people in the room see that too. It's not just kind of like a gag. I've always really dug that. It only seemed that way to you because you were on the outside.
Well, again, reality is subjective, and I can claim the meaning and the strength from whatever it is that happened to me, if I'm not called into account when my reality clashes with the reality of others in ways that creates the physical conditions that I'm living in. It is a good way to live in a dying empire when you personally are safe, and and also it means that one can insist on certain other things like the idea of the word leakage being sexy, or sandwich,
or toes.
Oh yeah, toes is clearly a winner for a lot of people, but
I
Yeah.
think that's a fairly claimed category.
Mhm.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I just there was a lot of words spilled on the eroticization of her big toe.
this is true. No, I mean Polly is such a non-character in like such a but again, by that point in the book, you're so up on what the author is doing that you're like, oh, hello, welcome in, sex pot, with a brain who always shows up in the nick of the time to save you because we're English and we like our strong, sexually confident cartoon women. It's Nanny. It always comes back to Nanny. Nanny and nurse and matron. Oh, matron. It's the reason we had Thatcher. It's the reason we have Graham Linehan, frankly. But I mean, I think that in terms of like jokes that like actually really worked, I liked the we are going to make our erotic fascination with trains literal.
Yes, that was actually that was great.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
They're like little if we're talking about stuff that we liked about this book, because I could complain forever. There are
Right.
little bits and pieces in here which I thought were really, really great, like little self-contained scenes, like Edie fighting off the home invaders right at the beginning when we don't know who Edie is.
Oh, I was just about to mention that.
Is just beautiful. It unfolds beautifully. Like we get the little bits of information about how this woman isn't who she seems she is. The way that she like constructs, ideas and personalities of who she is out of her long like spy experience and all of this. Again, very Le Carré, the old woman dealing with this danger. I think that we actually just had a very similar scene to this in one of them I can't remember, but that was just beautiful, and I wish we had more of old Edie, honestly.
Yeah.
Old Edie was much more enjoyable to me than young Edie as a reader. Yeah, and it really is in terms of like, again, reality is what you make of it. Like if you like shake your head and chuckle and be like, yeah, no, it's really funny that you've given me communist Japanese judo masters. I'm not going to think about like how stupid this is or or how potentially racist and orientalist this is. I'm going to think about this combination of traits and just like how silly this is in the moment, and that is good. But one of the interesting things actually, like when he picks up his Tommy gun, the Tommy gun from his father, like this is the big climactic moment of his character. And he has it, and he opens the trombone case and he has it in his arms. And it's like what his father from the 50s was doing with the Tommy gun is another question. This is all about this sort of like, the nostalgia for a better and more noble time actually goes back as the book goes back in the in the flashbacks. We're still thinking that way, which is also cool. But he picks it up and he goes, "At last my hand is whole again," which is a reference to "At last my arm is complete again" from Sweeney Todd, which is a play about English gangsters written by a New York Jew. Which is like, not only am I reconstructing my English identity out of this fantasy, but I'm reconstructing my English identity out of a fantasy that has been reflected back at me, by Bond movies that are made by the Broccolis, by what other people see in us and tell us about ourselves. it's for everybody, not just like, people on the outside of people, not just for the like the Asia, the mysterious foreign Easterners and all of this. I'm still creating this like truth for myself out of a pastiche that isn't even our pastiche. And I don't know how deliberate that was, but I thought it was cool.
I thought it was. I enjoyed the thing with the Tommy gun also, because every single flashback, you know that Tommy gun is his nickname, but every single flashback of him you see is he's doing much more sort of traditional, actual organized crime, where it's blackmail and you don't see all the sort of gonzo violent stuff. You never actually see his father use the Tommy gun. You see his father making business deals and reselling things and taking photographs, compromising photographs. But his moment of reconnecting with his father is in fact finding this Tommy gun, even though it's a thing that like Joe himself never really got to see in action. So again, it's connecting like to the legend of his dad as opposed to his dad as he actually was.
Yeah, it's connecting to the right symbol system, the symbol system which allows him to be strong and act rather than be a guy who can't say hi to a woman and, allows himself to be pushed around by the pencil pushers and the operators of the world. Is like if he uses this symbol system to think about himself, if he becomes crazy Joe Spork, then he is able to be an actor rather than somebody who is acted upon within his own life, which is sort of the important thing here, which means that we don't need all of this like inconvenient facts getting into this and ruining it for him because that makes it harder for him to self-actualize.
Mm-hmm.
But also, like, again, just sort of coming back, it comes back to the beginning, right? Where his getaway plane is the guy who he had originally returned the socks to. And that's also this really interesting juxtaposition, because at the beginning, the humor about returning the socks to the plane guy is that the plane guy is really obsessed with the firebombing of Dresden and like this horrible thing that his father did, and like that his father was like complicit in this crime against humanity.
Yeah.
And yes, it was justified. It was fighting the Nazis, but also all these horrible things. And then in the end, the guy's just like, oh yes, I too would like to kind of reconnect with my father, and we can fly off into the sunset. We're totally abandoning all of the bad things that our dads did and all of the bad things that our country did in favor of this dream of the past.
Yeah.
It's such an odd choice to end a book in like 2012, especially again, not to put a book in context, but this is like what, a year before the Brexit discourse starts taking off.
Mm-hmm.
You can read it as a very dark joke. Like I personally read it just as a one-to-one reflection of what was going on in the mind, in the collective consciousness of England at the time, which again leads directly into the Brexit discourse. Are we going to accept this story that the EU and that the rest of the world is telling us about how, we are criminals and that the empire is responsible for all of the current, pain and sorrow in the world, and like, oh, the West Bank is on fire, shrug, punchline that gets thrown out at some point in this book, or are we going to reject that and become in our own minds a world of cheeky chappies and like Tommies with hilariously written down accents and all of this stuff, and we know what answer the nation of Britain chose, and so this book is merely reflecting that reality in its ending,
I would have to think about that more. I'm not sure about that.
The only characters whose accents get written out phonetically are World War II enlisted men. The intention is probably to make a joke about how in World War II propaganda there was always one guy from Brooklyn, one guy from the South, or in this case, like one Scout, one Cockney, one Geordie, in the company to, emphasize national unity over regional divisions. But in this case, it just hit me full in the face with Brian Jake's Red Ball flashbacks.
Okay, as we're getting near, I do want to just say this is my one Le Carré sidetrack about the dad thing, because what is fascinating to me as somebody who read a bunch of Le Carré is that like Le Carré's dad issues is that his father was a confidence man, and that like his father was a criminal and a confidence man, and like dragged, and also I think not particularly good dad, and so, and that this occasionally comes up in his novels and in his autobiography, and so it is fascinating to me that the book by his son, the main character's dad issues are not Nick Harkaway's, they're John le Carré's dad issues. It's, how do I deal with my father being a criminal and a confidence man?
Yes, and it turns out that it is by becoming a different kind of confidence man, a liar for good, and then we don't get into the second part, which is what Le Carré was writing about, which is dealing with the consequences of that.
Right. No, it's just fascinating to me that this is in fact a book about one's dad's issues, among many other things.
So I think it's worth just sort of coming back, when I read it this time, just how much this is leaning into the capital F fantasy elements of it, and that you have, when Joe's narrative starts, it's this very humdrum, repairing this clock. How am I going to pay the bills? There's this cat keeps breaking into my house and doing stuff, and I don't like it. And it, you mentioned wondering after the torture scene if it was going to find out that was all like a dream of a dying man. This has this like very clear departure from reality, and there's just no way to go back into it. Mm-hmm. Which to me makes, so on the one hand, part of what I like about this novel is how much it's leaning into having fun and leaning into sort of wonder, with these sort of like extravagant, weird, a clockwork submarine with an elephant on it where they conjure up ice around it to protect it from depth charges. Like these sort of like really like outlandish, strange, sort of wild adventures that it's having, and how it conveys the gangster and noir elements. And you have this move into something, and Joe self-actualizing, and sort of this very careful opposition between clockwork and gambling, basically, and saying like you just have to throw the dice of your life. You can't set your life up like a perfect mechanism. It's not going to work. But then he has to fly away, right? He and Polly and everyone, they have to fly away, because what are you going to come back to?
Right.
What's your life now? And the way that it does keep this clean image of what being a gangster means very carefully, right? It very carefully keeps away the idea that like you murder people for money, you do, sex trafficking rings, you sell addictive drugs to preteens, like it keeps that kind of stuff way far away so that it can have this kind of fantasy. And I'm not saying that like this all is a dream in his head within the book or something like that, but it has that sort of like, I want something to feel real. I want something to feel exciting. And it can't come back and land again. It doesn't have a spot to be. And I just find that, I don't know, kind of fascinating, kind of poignant in a weird way.
It is like, it feels like it's walking you right up to what the ending of the book has to be, and then just saying, no, actually, we're going to stop right here. And there is something kind of weirdly poignant about leaving that unresolved.
I mean, on the one hand, I think that you're right. And that's partially because this book is about the stories that people tell themselves. And it's like they're, when we're walking at this fantasy of what might have been and what could have been, you do find that there is no solution to oneself unless you think, flying off into the sunset. But on the other hand, they're probably just flying to Spain. They're probably just flying to southern Spain where the gangsters go when they're done in England. And so the plot of Sexy Beast can happen later. That's just probably the ending that they get in this world.
But they're going to find the submarine.
Yes, I know.
It's still stashed away somewhere, yeah.
More ripping yarns to come.
I gotta say, as far as disappointment goes, I really wanted the elephant to come back. We have a baby elephant and we never, I felt like that was one place where we could have had, more ridiculous gonzo-ness. Was I wanted more elephants, because the elephants get set up so nicely.
We didn't talk about Bastian at all, right? Who's
That's true.
The ambassador of the elephants. Yeah.
That's true. Bastian is like the last, the soul of the elephants carrying on in this blind, dying pug.
Do we have any further notes?
Human consciousness is not magic vis-a-vis the uncertainty principle. Stop trying to make it magic. You can do other things.
Yes, well, I mean, it's just one more trope in the soup.
It was such like a hot topic at like a certain point in science fiction.
Oh, I remember.
I'm thinking like, what's the Greg Bear Blood Music, where like enough like intelligent bacteria like can like focus on something and change it all at once. Just this whole idea that anyways, it's a misreading of something that's really fascinating, but doesn't have to do with magic soul power.
Right. It's funny because also like Terry Pratchett was making fun of this trope.
Oh right, yeah. Uh-huh.
But, and like it keeps coming up as a thing to be made fun of, and so it is really funny to see it coming back again. Not that I'm not sure how much anything in this book is supposed to be taken totally seriously, though. So,
I don't want to finish with one last criticism, but I will say I think the weakest part of the book is it undercooks the main threat. It's not clear how the truth field works, or do the bees have like a separate truth field generator in them? They're going to all these hives all around the world, but we don't really see any of them. It's just sort of alluded to on the news.
I would have also liked to see more bees in general.
Yeah, they're almost like an anti-MacGuffin, where it's like, this should be the thing that's motivating like every scene in the end, but it's just kind of like, oh no, I guess kind of in the background, Armageddon is coming. I'm gonna go run around the sewer. It's weirdly absent, and I wish maybe that's we mentioned like wanting to have more weirdness here. Maybe we needed more of that. There's some great clockwork bits here when we start getting like the latter-day Ruskinites who are like veiled, and some of them are brainwashed humans and others are like clockwork automata. Like that's pretty weird. I could have done with more of that.
Yeah.
But I needed more of how the beepocalypse was actually going down.
Yeah. Unfortunately, like when that started at my eyes started gliding off the page a little bit, and that made the stuff that it was connected to, like the I'm doing this to be more like God stuff. I mean, like yeah, this is a villain speech. Skip.
Right, but I think that having the bees be like a more present force in the narrative, and just more threatening in general, might have made. I think it would have been a lot more interesting than the I'm doing this to be a god thing.
Yeah.
You don't even have to explain it necessarily. Just have them like have more of the actual scary effects of these bees doing something. Because as it is, they're just kind of cute.
I feel bad that we haven't woven more bee puns through this whole conversation now, but
I can supply an endless amount of bee facts if you want fun facts about bees, having worked on the Beekeeper's Handbook.
Oh, nice.
Well, I won't do the bee pun jingle, honey, not for love and not for money. Got no interest in those compound eyes. I've got no time to wax poetic, droning on and on pathetic. Just the notion breaks me out in hives. Just how low do you think I've fallen? All these rhymes are quite appalling. It's not exactly death, where is thy sting? You wouldn't catch Byron or Shelley, guts all turned to royal jelly, bumbling before their virgin queen. That was Elizabeth, wasn't it? Kind of lost it there. Hey, by the way, what does a bee get at the barbershop? A buzz cut. How hot is it in a beehive? Swarm enough. Got some hot larvae in there. I've got no time to wax poetic, droning on and on pathetic. Just the notion breaks me out in hives. Just how low do you think I've fallen? All these rhymes are quite appalling. It's not exactly death, where is thy sting? You wouldn't catch Byron or Shelley, guts all turned to royal jelly, bumbling before their virgin queen. I think I kind of lost it there. Hey, what does a bee get at the barbershop? A buzz cut. How hot is it in a beehive? Swarm enough. Got some hot larvae in there.
All right. Notes from me. Even as in my capacity as an Anglophile, there was one Englishism in here that completely baffled me, and I had to look up, which is the Spanish archer. Giving somebody the Spanish archer. It's elbow. giving somebody the elbow
My God.
is what that comes from.
So good.
Yeah, but basically, whether you think that's so good will determine whether you. And I'm almost certain this is an accident, and I'm just really hoping that it's not an accident. But our man Joshua Joseph Spork is a JoJo, and he kind of is a JoJo, what with his like parentage and all of that. So, I'm hoping that on some level JoJo's Bizarre Adventure was in the mix of trope soup that went into this book, because that would make me very happy. And finally, you don't get to write the sentence Germany had cut off its proud Semitic nose and gouged out its brown Romany eyes.
Yeah.
But as if it's just another bit of spice in all of this soup. But that is all that I have. If we do not have anything else though, I had a terrible time reading this book, but I had a really fun time discussing it. And
yes.
So thank you, Casella, for bringing it to our attention. And like now I have honestly I have a much deeper appreciation for Carla's choice, having read this.
Well, you're welcome, and condolences.
We did wonder if having, said, oh, well, we had a lot of complaints about Carla's choice, but he did, there's a lot of like competent craft things in the book. So I would totally read one of his science fiction novels, and we wondered if this was chosen specifically to make us regret this, but
No.
So I had suggested this one on the strength of it containing arguable wizards and arguable lesbians.
It absolutely fits the remit of the podcast. So great choice there.
I would suggest the Ganaway world if you want just the weirdness in this just cranked up to 100, and everything else cranked down. And I would recommend. I feel like Tiger Man in a lot of ways feels to me like his most mature work in some ways. So if you ever feel like rolling the dice again on a hard
someday I might. I read very quickly, and I don't use electronics for 25 hours out of the week. So,
all right, we'll draw the podcast to a close on that note. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you for joining us. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right. Oh, and what is the name of your podcast? If people want to seek you out.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm Jake Casella Brookins. I am the publishing editor at the Ancillary Review of Books, where we review speculative fiction, kind of interpreted broadly. And I am also the host of the podcast A Meal of Thorns, where we talk about one book at a time with a critic or scholar and kind of dig through it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Nice.
All right.
Yeah. Thanks again.
All right. Bye.